Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Reveal the Legend Within Story Festival World-Class Speakers Interviews, and today's guest is Paul Adams. And the thing I love about this interview, apart from loving Paul, is the fact that he's doing it from a pub. Which just goes to show that we literally work wherever we want, whenever we want. We could just make it all happen. And it's so appropriate because Paul is a corporate escapee. So, welcome, Paul.
Hello. Hi, Mel. Welcome to everyone that's listening.
And watching. And I do have a question right off the back about that corporate escapee business, because I'm not from the corporate world, I'm from the creative world, so I don't know your world at all. Does everybody why do people need to escape the corporate world?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I didn't realize for a long time that I needed to escape anything. So as you're working and working away, you think it's normal. You look to your left, you look to your right, everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's chasing the same successes and kind of pathway. The real challenge comes in once your eyes are opened, that actually you didn't choose that pathway. It was the one that was chosen for you by your parents, by your culture, your society. And then if you're anything like me, it becomes apparent that it might not be the way, the place that you want to be for the next 30 years, which is actually quite scary. Scary for two reasons. One, it feels like you may be trapped and there's no way out for the next 30 years. And two, if you do feel you can get out, you have no blueprint for what you're going to do next.
Yeah, and actually, your story is quite interesting because you were actually very successful in the corporate world. This is not a story of like failure and needing to do something else. You were successful.
No,
you were
absolutely
a partner.
So I was a director in a consulting firm, and I was about to make partner. And yeah, I think by normal metrics of success, I was very successful. The interesting thing is I was successfully unhappy. So I was successful, but I was not feeling joyful about that. And I couldn't work out why. And I think when I look back and reflect on it, it's that every time I made more money, it gave me a short boost of confidence that I could do it. It gave me a short boost of confidence that others were validating me and making me feel that I could do it. But at the same time, I felt like I was getting further and further from my own path, from my own journey, the one that I had thought I would be leading when I was 10, 11, 12 years old.
Okay, so it's only when you get there that you realize that it was wrong. Because when you're 10, 11, 12 and you're doing what looks normal, you assume that it will end up where you want it to. Or
exactly, completely, yeah. At 10, 11, 12, 13, you assume that you'll continue to do the things that you enjoy, continue to do the things that you like, that you're good at, that you've got passion for. And then somewhere along the way, the world steps in and says, oh no, that's too risky. To do what you enjoy and do what you like, do what you're good at. No, that's too risky. No, here's a safer path for you. Go and get a profession. Go and work for a bigger company, work really hard, earn your stripes, wait for other people to tell you that you're doing a good job. It's all about turning that around so people are kind of steering you down that safe route that has a lot less risk. I can clearly remember my dad telling me and being proud of all the things that I could do when I was younger, and then at the same time saying, but of course, they don't make any money. So make sure you get a career behind you. Make sure you get a profession behind you. And now as an adult, just turning around going, my gosh, that was really my moment when I could have gone, no, I'm gonna take the risk here, Dad. I'll take this on. but I wasn't brave enough, and I didn't know that that was possible.
Well, and you know, who could possibly blame you or anybody else? Because that was the story I heard was, oh, that won't make money. Go and do a pitman shorthand. I mean, I had to go and do a pitman shorthand so that I could get a good job as a secretary, and the best one would be in the estate agent. Then I'd know who all the rich men were, who would then be my financial plan. So,
Right.
you know, we have our stories. And, but you tell one about being in a playground that I think everyone can relate to.
I think it's a story that just keeps coming back to me. So, you know, I can remember just being stood up against a wall and looking out in front of me and seeing two of my classmates, and they're staring at me, and they're staring at a whole row of other boys that are lined up against this wall. And all I'm thinking is, well, am I going to get picked today? I hope I don't get picked last. I know I'm not going to get picked first. And part of me's thinking, I want to sink back into this wall. And the other part of me's thinking, I should puff up my chest and step forward and say, here I am. And then this resounding kind of replaying thing of, I don't even like football anyway. Not sure why I'm here.
See, that's the piece that gets me, isn't it? It's like, pick me. I don't really want to do this, but pick me.
Precisely. It's
And
like
that's what you're
the entire
saying.
rite of passage.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. For everyone must be able to relate to that. But that definitely is parallel to that. You know, you end up in something you don't really, wasn't particularly your choice. Like, you don't like football and you end up playing it because that's the wall you're standing against and you need to get picked. And it's
Right.
the being picked piece that gets you to then go, oh, cool, I got picked.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll play hard.
And it becomes something that you then rely on, because the only reason you're happy or sad that day is whether you got picked or not because of whether you progressed at football or progressed in your workplace or were driving towards your own specific goal. It's all about whether somebody else chose you. And that's a really difficult place to be. And that's almost like how you could explain the idea of a job or a career or the corporate life being a prison, a trap. Because once you're in it, you've been picked. And then if you don't get picked at the end of the year in your annual appraisal, you feel bad. And if you do get picked, it kind of validates that you should keep going, to keep seeking out more times when you could get chosen, which is just fascinating. You're so reliant then on other people and their opinion of you and how well you're doing in their eyes, and nothing at all to do with your own control and what your own self-reliance might be.
So what happened the day you decided to quit?
Yeah, for me, it was a really interesting time. So, you know, I was getting picked. Someone had come along to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and, you know, in the old way of that it was done, and said, we think you're ready to put yourself forward to be a partner. And I downloaded all the forms, the documents I needed to, you know, put forward and present. And I couldn't put my fingers to the typewriter. I knew exactly what they wanted me to write, or what I could have written that would have allowed me to get chosen. And I couldn't put my fingers on the typewriter or pen to paper in order to write it, because I knew that it would have been two things. One, I would have been fraudulent to myself, and the other would be that I was seeking something that I didn't really want. It would have taken me even further away from my values and my goals in life. So it was a fascinating time. Kind of went over a period of 2 to 3 years, really.
Right. Now, the thing is, I do know something that I have always found very fascinating about you. And so I'm going to decide to just bring it in to this conversation. You're actually a fraud accountant, or were.
That's right.
So you know
yeah.
a tad about fraud.
That's right. So my career was in forensic accounting and fraud investigations.
Forensic accounting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have this story about like how forensic how fraud starts out as something really small in forensic accounting. And
yeah.
Tell me that one.
Yeah, so every time I've looked at any fraud or big financial scandal, and I was kind of fortunate enough, I suppose, just from the interest and intrigue of it, to look at some of the world's largest financial scandals. And every time you look back, they always start off really small. It's one of those times that at the end of the year, the numbers don't quite add up right. So the shareholders are going to be upset. And there's always a decision that's made by the management, by the executive team, to in some way cover that up or pretend it didn't exist, to use some sort of accounting, fictitious accounting, creative accounting, to just cover up that bad news. Oh, no, we don't want to show that to the world. And then they're hoping that the following year, things will come back to play nicely. And it only gets bigger. The following year, that gap in the accounts, the one that they've just been desperately trying to hide from the shareholders and the stakeholders, only gets bigger. And they've got a choice at that point, and it's a harder choice than the first one they had. They choose to call themselves out as liars, as fraudsters, or they amplify what they started the year before. And the interesting thing about all of it is people often, when they talk about a fraud, they talk about a company committing fraud. But it's never a company that commits fraud. It's always people inside those organizations that have made a decision against their own intuition, their own values, their own principles, in most cases, their own better judgment, just to appease the people they think they need to appease. And it just gets bigger. The problem gets bigger every time.
Right. And how much of a parallel is that to those micro decisions that you make that end up just getting harder and harder to course correct, to appease others, and you end up feeling a fraud because you don't feel and it's got something to do with your values, because you just mentioned the word values, that you're moving away from your values when you're committing fraud on a business scale. But you're saying that that's how you can tell whether you're aligned to the job, or is that how you can pull yourself back to what it is you really want?
Yeah, both. I think both. I think one is the indicator of whether you're aligned and you're working in alignment with yourself, and the other is maybe the route back as well at the same time. So, I mean, I just remember very clearly that I'd gone into the corporate world with, in fact, I'll take you back a little bit. So my wife and I, we had our son earlier than we expected. And at that time, neither of us had a house. We didn't own anything. And so when he came along, I just remember this huge pressure building up, thinking, how am I going to provide for him now that he's come along, and myself and my wife, and how are we going to do that together? And I knew, because I'd been told all of my life, that if you go off and get a profession and work in that area, then you can make more money. And at the time I was teaching maths and teaching PE in schools.
Well, that's a fascinating story, right? Because you were actually in Africa when you got the news that you were going to be a dad.
I was. I'd moved to Malawi 1 month before receiving the news that I was going to be a dad. Yeah. And in fact, my wife was not my wife at the time. She was my girlfriend, and she was still in England. And so she phoned me up standard on a Friday night, like we were having our regular kind of phone calls. And that Friday was just very different from all the others.
Right, and you've taken that passion job in Africa to teach, because that's your background, really, isn't it? It's teaching.
Right, yeah. And I think I'd taken a job in Africa as a teacher, but in the sense of still exploring the world, still exploring myself. I was 25 years old, and just almost like looking forward, and everything was still out in front of me. And then, having received that phone call, I had an overwhelming sense of joy, and at the same time overwhelming sense of fear and pressure. How am I going to live up to this task? And I think that was the spark that sort of set off my own fraudulent behavior in a way. So I left the teaching profession behind. I went and got a job in London as an accountant. I trained, I worked really hard to get my accounting qualifications, something I'd said I would never do once I left university. But I did it. Much of it was very enjoyable. But then I found that those mini decisions were building up. Because as I earned more money, I felt I could provide more for my family. And I felt more pressure to keep doing that. Keep earning more money, keep providing for the family, and keep that all moving forwards. And I suppose I'd abandoned the trust that I used to have in myself, that it would all work out in case. But I remember then kind of, then later on, as my own sense of fraud had grown and my own earning power had grown, this, the story that I told myself. So the story that I told myself was that I'm going to work at 7 in the morning and coming home at 9 p.m. at night because I'm providing for my family, for my children. When my biggest values were, I knew that to provide for my children, I needed to provide time first. And I had taken all of my time away just to keep them safe and spending money and financially stable. And that was the biggest kind of indicator to me that I was distant and had lost alignment with my own pathway. So I had to take a big leap, and I decided to do it. And I did it in many ways because I looked around and I thought, well, actually, I'm a bigger risk taker than most of the people in the office, my friends and colleagues. If I'm not willing to take this leap to find more alignment with my own life, then how would I expect others who are more risk averse, have a bigger fear of failure than I do? How would I expect them to take it? So I thought, right, that's it. I'm gonna resign. I'm gonna go out on my own to do my thing, which I'd always known was to coach, mentor, teach others, both in sport, in business, and in life. It was always the same. And so I took that enormous leap, and almost immediately, I found more alignment with who I was. It was almost like I'd called out my own fraud. I'd blowed on myself. And it was the hugest sense of relief I've ever had.
You picked you.
Exactly. Goes with my motto. Don't wait to get selected. Pick yourself. Yeah. And I see it.
And that's why, isn't it? It's that was the day you picked yourself. Didn't wait for somebody else to pick you, didn't puff your chest up, didn't play with the role so that you'd get picked next time. That was the day you picked yourself.
Entirely. I picked myself. I picked the game. I picked who I wanted to do it with, who I wanted to align myself with. The whole thing. You pick everything. But it's not. If I think back about that time when you're stood against the wall waiting to get selected to kick a ball about at lunchtime, I completely understand why we do it. Somebody has said we're going to play football, and other people have followed, and that's validated the decision to play football. If I'd chosen to say, let's go swing in trees or go and run around the field, people might not have followed me. I might have been on my own. And I think that's the biggest fear we always have, is first and foremost that, will I be on my own doing this? Will anyone be interested? Will anyone come with me?
That's why our dads say, oh no, that won't make money. It's because if you go and do the thing you're passionate about, you might just end up on your own with nobody interested in not making any money.
Precisely. Yeah.
So tell me, now that you have picked yourself and you've picked your game, and you do look pretty miserable, I've got to be honest, sitting in the pub picking up Wi-Fi and having a chat with me. What has changed?
I think the biggest thing was something that was said probably about 2 months after I resigned from work, where I'd gone to pick my son up from his friend's house. And his mother and I were talking in the kitchen, and she said, Austin's just been saying it's so nice to have you around, to have you there to talk to. And it was, and that was just a huge moment for me, that I'd always put a lot of emphasis and energy on thinking about my children. And I think then just to recognize that I hadn't been there for them, and now they could see that I was there for them. From there, everything else is almost like noise, right? So yes, I still have to pay the mortgage. Yes, I've still got to pay the bills. You've got to work out what all of that kind of looks like in the new game, in the game that you've picked, in the game that you've designed.
The game without a map,
you know, so
or at least you think it doesn't have a map. And then you
game
find you're
without a
not
map.
alone.
Exactly. It's like,
and then you find there are people
like,
who want to quit, who want an exit strategy, and you get to help them.
Entirely, which is so rewarding. And even if they want to stay in it, but they didn't realize the role that they wanted to play when they were staying in it, or whether they'd chosen their position, or whether they were waiting for someone else to choose their position. And so it's all about really taking that control back. And a lovely phrase that someone had told me when I was being coached years ago, that they said to me, you really want to author your own journey. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. It's not reading it and almost knowing that it's laid out for you. The inspiration, the excitement, the enjoyment is in actually writing it, as well as the challenge. And it's in the challenge, I think, that really comes that fulfillment, that, oh yeah, okay, now I know that I wrote that story, so I can't turn around at the end of my life and say I didn't have a say in it. I can't blame it on anyone else. And I think that's the real joy from it. And when I talk to clients, that's what they're really kind of seeking themselves. So when I work with my clients, they're really seeking, how can I have more control of the pen writing my story?
Right, and so you get them to pick them first, pick themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. What's
Exactly.
your motto?
I mean, it's a great question. So don't wait to get selected. Pick yourself.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful when you say, because it's a really interesting question. You know, I might have a client, which I've had in the past, who says, I want to get promoted. So I really feel like I'm ready to get promoted, and I can't understand why no one's selecting me yet. I can't understand why I haven't been picked. And as soon as you ask the question, you know, what would you pick yourself? It makes them start to think, not about getting selected and what other people think of them, but much more about, well, what would I want to do? What would I want someone in my position to do? And then they very quickly start to decide whether they're, you know, just slightly off their path and they can tweak it and move back onto it, or whether they've really become quite diverged from their road and they need to find a way back. And the nice thing is that there's always a way back. And people think that to move off the road they're on is scary and risky and, you know, almost that sense of dread. But there is a way back. There is a way off the road that you're on, onto the road that you want to be onto. So yeah, it's really exciting to work with. Yeah,
because it's just a feeling that there's no map. Right at the very beginning of this conversation, you said, you know, do something where there was no map. There is. It's just you don't know other people are doing it until you walk on that road. You just think there is one. Precisely. And then you get there and you're like, oh, there's 18,000 people walking this every day. Oh,
correct.
All
yeah.
right.
So you definitely find allies along the way. Yeah, you find allies along the way. And I think also that you know, I'm 42 years old. I've been building a map in my head for 42 years. I've only just been choosing to follow it in the last few. Before that, I was discarding my own map to follow other people's, because I was told that their map was better than mine. I was told. I love that idea,
that truth that you're saying. Sorry. I love that truth that you're saying, that you were building the map, because it's you, and that's the piece that was really couldn't type that letter, isn't it? That was the piece that was like, no, look, there really is a map. Please, please just open this one and have a look and do it. That's the side of you that couldn't write. It wasn't like you were just starting again.
That's right.
It was you.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. It's not that I started again. It's just exactly allowing myself to follow the map that was there. But what's interesting is that as you're pushing it down and suppressing it to follow other people's maps, you don't realize it's there. It's only when you start to sit back and reflect. And that's why I've called my program Reflect. Look at that reality and allow yourself to explore it. And it's just so interesting to sort of take people on that program, that process, so that they're able to see that for themselves.
I love it. We need people like you so that we can all escape back to ourselves. Or in your case, as you say, don't wait to be selected, pick yourself. Thank you so much for this conversation, for pausing in the pub to have a chat with us. I can't wait for people to come and see and hear more of you when you tell your the fuller story of that journey from the playground through forensic accounting to who you are today, and then maybe they'll be able to choose to do a workshop with you on that day, which is just amazing. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, that's been such a pleasure. No, I look forward to it. Yeah.
Me too.
Thank you, Mel.
Thank you, and I'll see you on the other side.